Good morning. My name is Susan Johnson, and I am the membership secretary for the International Wizard of Oz Club. My co-secretary is Bill Beam, who lives in Michigan. I live in California. Together, we process your membership and make sure that you get your welcome letter and your card. This morning, I'm going to bring you another story from Oziana, the original publication of the International Wizard of Oz Club. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Oziana this year. And I am so happy to have you join me again. This story is by Judy Bieber. Judy Bieber has been a member of the Wizard of Oz Club since she was a child. Judy Bieber lives in New Mexico, and she is a professor at the University of New Mexico. Judy Bieber was one of the youngest booksellers ever licensed, and she was licensed as a bookseller when she was only 11 years old. Her father, Herm Bieber, was instrumental in helping her with her collection and helping her to become a bookseller and earn money for her college education. Although Herm Bieber has never read an Oz book in his life, he has participated in conventions and supported his daughter throughout her childhood and her young adulthood to become that professor, that Oz collector. And this is one of the first stories that Judy ever submitted to Oziana. This is from the 1980 edition of Oziana. The name of the story is How the Cowardly Lion Met the Hungry Tiger. One day, the Cowardly Lion decided to take a trip to the Gilligan country, a place he had never been before. For several days, he traveled and finally reached the Great Gilligan Forest. The forest was grand and majestic. He was surrounded by tall and stately trees of a deep purple color, and as far as he could see, everything was of a purple hue. Soon, he realized there was something strange about his surroundings. There was nothing to be seen or heard, neither man nor beast. The wood was completely deserted. The Cowardly Lion was puzzled at this and began searching for somebody to talk to. An hour later, he found an immense tiger in a nearby thicket. The tiger whispered, "Get away from this forest before the wicked Raji discovers your presence." The Cowardly Lion inquired, "Who in Oz is Raji, and what has he done to this forest?" The tiger answered, "Life in the forest used to be happy and carefree. But when Raji came, everything changed. He is a powerful sorcerer and rules us like a tyrant. The whole forest is silent so he can perform his magic feats. We've tried to rebel, but Raji discovered our plans by consulting his magic oracle. Then he captured the ringleaders and turned them into canary birds." The Cowardly Lion said, "This is indeed unfortunate. Something must be done to liberate you, and I think I can help you. I won't be frightened because the Wizard of Oz gave me a large dose of courage not too long ago." "Who is the Wizard of Oz, and how did you obtain courage from him?" asked the tiger. The Cowardly Lion replied, "One day I met a little girl named Dorothy who was blown to Oz from Kansas in the outside world. She was traveling with a live scarecrow and a Tin Woodman to the Emerald City, hoping that the wizard would send her back to Kansas. The scarecrow wanted brains and the Tin Woodman wanted a heart. I went with them to get some courage. When we got there, the wizard would not grant our request until we destroyed the Wicked Witch of the West. Dorothy melted her, and when we got back, we discovered the wizard was a humbug. But somehow he gave us what we desired, except that he couldn't quite get Dorothy back to Kansas. The balloon went off without her, but she was sent home by Glinda, the good sorceress." The tiger replied, "That is an unusual history. By the way, what's your name?" "I'm called the Hungry Tiger." He answered, "I'm called the Cowardly Lion. Why are you called the Hungry Tiger?" I'm called the hungry tiger because I have an enormous appetite that is never satisfied. I also crave fat babies, but I could never eat one because my conscience would never permit it, said the hungry tiger. Suddenly, the cowardly lion said, I have an idea. If we steal the oracle, we could think of a plan to conquer him without his knowledge. The hungry tiger replied, we could not get the oracle because it is guarded by a Kalida that was captured and enchanted to obey him. He guards it day and night. Perhaps we might draw him away from it. Anyway, could you meet me to this Raji's home so that we might find a way? Suggested the cowardly lion. The hungry tiger agreed to this. He walked toward a nearby clearing and went left and then right. Finally, they came to an indistinct trail that went on and on. As they promised, the forest grew darker and more forbidding. They turned a bend in the road and came in sight of his home. His home was an enormous castle. It had many tall spires and minarets. Otherwise, it was very plain in appearance. There were no flags, no banners, nor ornaments of any kind. Instead, the traditional Gilligan purple. The castle was painted jet black. Jet black. Well, here we are, said the hungry tiger. It doesn't look like his home. Let's go inside. The hungry tiger and the cowardly lion entered the castle and began to look for the oracle. The castle gave one a feeling of uneasiness in spite of its magnificence. To pass the time, the cowardly lion talked about his adventures as they looked. Most of the rooms were vacant. The first room they found that was not vacant was a bedchamber. It was not very interesting, save for the numerous bird cages, which each held a single canary bird. The cowardly lion talked to them, for they were his friends from the forest who had been enchanted. When talking, he received no answers, for they had been deprived of their power of speech when they were enchanted. Oh. But they could still hear. And the hungry tiger encouraged them and said they would soon be rescued. They left the bedchamber and soon came to another room, a spacious kitchen. The cupboards were filled with dozens and dozens of jars with nearly printed labels. The cowardly lion read one. The label said, concentrated food, number 721, roast beef dinner. Mix 2 tablespoons with 1 cup of water. Stir for 3 minutes. Recite this phrase, Iga, Aga, Group. The rest of the jars had similar labels, neatly labeled, but they were for other foods. One jar was at least 10 times larger than the others. It was simply labeled Kalida's food, mixed with equal parts water. Another room that they discovered was the magician's laboratory. Shelves upon shelves were filled with strange magical compounds. The cowardly lion read some labels entitled bewitching powder, liquid of wisdom, sleeping powder, and many others. Then it became perfectly obvious to the cowardly lion. He had hit upon a plan. He called the hungry tiger and said, I have an idea. Let's put some of this sleeping powder in the Kalida's food. Raji will probably feed the Kalida this evening and we can take the oracle while he sleeps. The tiger agreed readily to this, and they carried out their plan. Then they hurried to renew their search for the oracle. After much futile watching, they were finally rewarded. From one room, a Kalida's low growling could be heard. When they hurried down the maze of halls and corridors and went out of the castle, they hid in some shrubbery by the road, and the cowardly lion explained what they were going to do. He said, we'll stay here until Raji comes back. Then when he leaves, we'll go in and take the oracle. The hungry tiger said, that sounds all right to me, but how are we going to conquer Raji once we have it? Well, he said uneasily, I don't exactly know, but I'll think of a plan somehow. They settled themselves to wait. They only had to wait a few hours, but to the 2 beasts, it seemed like an eternity. They were growing stiff and cramped in their hidden places. The cowardly lion longed for a roar. When he thought he could stand it no longer, the hungry tiger nudged him to be quiet, for a man was walking down the road to the castle, the wicked Raji himself. They settled themselves to wait. For a fierce villain, Raji was not as bad looking as one might think. In spite of being wicked, he was not old and ugly. He appeared to be about 30 years of age. He was rather short and slight of build and was wearing tight-fitting garments of black velvet with silver trim and matching hat adorned with a bright green feather. His face was rather good looking except for his eyes, which had an evil glare, as if there were a fire smoldering in them. He entered the castle, and the Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger prepared themselves for another long, tedious wait. Raji came out of the castle right away, but the Cowardly Lion said they should wait so the sleeping powder could take effect. So the tiger, realizing the wisdom in this, agreed to wait for another hour. When the hour was up, they re-entered the castle and went to the room that contained the oracle. The Cowardly Lion nudged the door open a crack and peered into the room rather cautiously. There was the Kalita, sleeping peacefully as a baby and snoring softly. He motioned the Hungry Tiger that the coast was clear, and they entered the room. The magic oracle was on a low table. It looked very much like a crystal ball. It appeared to be made of glass, but like almost everything else in the Gilligan country, it had a faint purple tint to it. The Cowardly Lion carried it out by tying a string to it and carrying it in his mouth. Their quest was finished. They proceeded to leave. They had not gone far when they heard a shout. Theirs was Raji, screaming with rage, threatening them and chasing them at full speed. The Cowardly Lion ran out of the palace and didn't stop running until he was deep in the woods. Then he looked back and saw that the Hungry Tiger was not with him. He waited anxiously for a few minutes, and his anxiety increased. When the Hungry Tiger failed to appear, where was the Hungry Tiger? He was still in Raji's castle. The sight of the sorcerer chasing him was just too much for the Hungry Tiger. He stood rooted to the spot in terror, and Raji caught him easily. Of course, the Cowardly Lion did not know all this. He just set the oracle down and said, "I wonder what has happened to the Hungry Tiger." Then the most amazing thing happened. The oracle's surface grew cloudy, and when it cleared up, it showed an image of the Hungry Tiger in Raji's castle. The Cowardly Lion saw everything that was happening, and when he listened closely enough, he could hear what was being said. The Cowardly Lion saw that the Hungry Tiger was tied up with a strong, thick rope in the magician's laboratory. Raji went to the cupboard and took out 3 jars filled with magic powders. He measured out equal parts of the 3 powders and set them in a silver basin. Then he set fire to it and produced a thick black smoke, which enveloped the Hungry Tiger. Then he waved his hands in mysterious movements and gestures. When the smoke rose, the Hungry Tiger was no longer there. Raji had transformed him into a canary bird. The Cowardly Lion was by this time exhausted. So hiding the oracle in a nearby clump of bushes, he curled up and fell fast asleep. When he awoke, it was morning, and he found soon enough that he was not alone, for from across the clearing, an immense leopard looked at him with much curiosity. The leopard spoke bluntly. "Who are you, and where you come from?" The Cowardly Lion introduced himself and told the inquiring leopard how he got there and all of his adventures up to now, as he had witnessed the Hungry Tiger's enchantment. Then he asked the leopard what he was called. The leopard replied, "My name is Gugu. I'm very sorry to hear about the Hungry Tiger's predicament, for he was a good friend. How are you going to conquer Raji in the first place? You failed to mention it." Gugu said, Cowardly Lion said, "Well," replied the Cowardly Lion, "I don't really know. Taking the oracle was the first step, you know." Gugu said, "Well, let me help you think of a plan. Surely 2 heads are better than 1. The Cowardly Lion agreed, and they set out to think. They had been silent for about 20 minutes when the leopard said, "Why not ask the oracle?" "Of course," claimed the Hungry Tiger. "I should have thought of that long ago." He looked in the bushes for a moment and took the oracle out. Then he asked it how they could conquer Raji. The oracle's surface grew cloudy as it had before. When it cleared, it said, "Take the green feather. Once it is destroyed, Raji will have no magic power, and all enchantments will be instantly broken." Gugu looked blank. "The green feather?" he asked. Oh, it must be the feather in Raji's hat. But how will we get near enough to the feather to steal it? Inquired Gugu. I have an idea, exclaimed the hungry tiger. I will pretend to be his friend, and when he's sleeping, I'll take it. No doubt he'll be out often, so I can meet you here tomorrow and tell you if I need help. I'll meet you here in the clearing at 12 noon. Meanwhile, just resume your normal life and pretend nothing has happened. Goodbye until tomorrow. The cowardly lion then left the clearing and started off to Raji's palace. When he arrived, he knocked boldly on the door and waited. After several minutes had passed and several more knockings, Raji opened the door and stood scowling at the cowardly lion. He demanded harshly, "Well, what do you want?" The cowardly lion replied, "I am from the Munchkin country. I was king there, but I have left because my subjects were peaceful and would not make a war on others or even quarrel among themselves, and life accordingly became unbearably dull. I enjoy making everyone unhappy, so when I heard of your wickedness, I came here in the hope of becoming your ally." Raji was much impressed by this speech. He said, "Very well. You can guard my castle because my oracle has been stolen and much of my power has been reduced by the loss of it." The cowardly lion pretended to be much pleased. He agreed readily and declared he would punish all forest dwellers that came near the castle. Then Raji went out to do mischief and told the cowardly lion to explore the castle and see where the rooms were situated. The cowardly lion thanked him, and when Raji left, he went straight to the bedchamber where the canaries were located. The canaries were not there. Then he searched until he found them in a small attic room. As soon as he entered, one of the canaries started chirping and flying in his cage. "Are you the hungry tiger?" he asked. The bird nodded, and the cowardly lion told him what he had been doing and his plan to rescue them. Then he left and went to the front door and pretended to guard it. Raji returned shortly before noon and was pleased to see the cowardly lion assuming his duties. Then he asked the cowardly lion how the morning had gone. The cowardly lion responded, "Very well. A herd of silly, chattering monkeys came by, and after I twisted and pulled a few tails, they were happy to go. Now I would like to go into the forest and find something for lunch. I'll be back in an hour." He left and headed for the clearing in which he was to meet Gugu. After waiting in the clearing for about 5 minutes, Gugu arrived. "I'm doing great, Gugu. I think I'll need some help, though, from you. Here's the plan. Tonight at midnight, build a fire in the clearing, and if I can get the feather, we'll burn it in the fire. That's all you have to do. Just leave the rest to me. Now we better be getting back to the castle." The cowardly lion then returned to the castle and again began to guard it. When he returned, Raji left and did not come back until nightfall. The cowardly lion greeted him and suggested that he should guard the bedchamber at night to ensure his safety. Raji agreed and then stated he was going to work in his laboratory and did not wish to be disturbed. The cowardly lion waited and waited for Raji to finish up and go to bed. He had waited for about 3 hours when Raji emerged from the laboratory and announced he was going to sleep. The cowardly lion went to the bedchamber and peeked through the keyhole. He saw Raji hide the feather and waited until he thought Raji was asleep. Then he crept into the room and bumped into something on the way. Raji awoke at once and asked him, "What is he doing there?" Cowardly lion replied, "I heard a strange noise, so I came in to see what it was." Raji was satisfied with the explanation, went back to sleep. The cowardly lion tried again and was successful. After getting the feather, he went to the canaries and set them free and told them to follow without a sound. The cowardly lion then left the castle and went to the clearing. Gugu was already there and the fire was kindled. The cowardly lion thrust the feather into the fire. The flames immediately rose and flickered in every color of the rainbow. It roared and crackled like a living thing. Soon all the birds and beasts of the forest came to the clearing to see what was happening. Meanwhile, in the castle, Raji heard the commotion and got dressed so he could find out what was going on. When he could not find his feather, he was furious and soon guessed what had happened. He ran to the clearing only to see the last of his feather burn. Immediately, the canaries turned into their natural forms, and one of them, a lion, pinned down Raji. He was then taken to the edge of the forest and banished forever. The Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger left them for a while, but told them to wait for further development. They went back to where the oracle was hidden and hurled it into a deep swamp so that it could do no further wrong. Then they returned to the clearing, and the Cowardly Lion made a little speech. Cowardly Lion spoke, "Friends, today Raji has been conquered, and I will tell you how it happened." Then he told them what had happened and continued. "I and the Hungry Tiger are going to the Emerald City to see some old friends. Since Gugu has played such a large part in rescuing you, I propose to make him your new king." His suggestion was received with great approval. So now that their work was finished, they started their journey to the Emerald City. Their trip to the Emerald City was uneventful, and when they got there, they learned the Scarecrow was no longer king, but had been succeeded by Ozma. The next day, they were introduced to Ozma, and she appointed them her royal bodyguards. From that day on, they lived in splendor in the magnificent Emerald City. The end. This has been a story by Judy Bieber, longtime member of the Wizard of Oz Club. The story was illustrated by, let's see, doesn't say. Anyway, a story by Judy Bieber from the 1980 edition of Oziana. We've gone back to the almost 20 years of Oziana. I hope that you've enjoyed this story about how the Cowardly Lion met the Hungry Tiger. And I hope that you will join us again for another story from Oziana, the original publication of the Wizard of Oz Club by its poets, its authors, and its illustrators. Thank you.